Hey everybody, this is Lunchbox Radio and my name is Alex, your host. Now, before we get into the podcast today, I want to just touch on a couple things first. First, you can go listen to the previous episodes of the podcast wherever you get your podcast. And if you're listening to this and you would rather be watching this, now you can also go watch previous episodes of the podcast over on the YouTube channel, which will always be linked in the description of the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, you're already here. I don't need to tell you that. But I wanted to touch on a couple things before we get to the main episode. First off, I've been doing really recent seasonal reviews from the spring 2025 season. This will be the last one of those. This is this will spoil it, but not really, because you've probably read the title of the video. This is the My Hero Academia Vigilantes episode. After this, what will happen next is a kind of grand bonanza of an episode that I do once around the beginning of every season, usually not right at the beginning, because I want to watch stuff before I declare what I'm watching for the season, but it'll be the kind of seasonal what I'm watching episode. And the way that works is on YouTube, I try and get all the trailers and talk about them and talk about what I'm interested in them, why I'm interested in them, and all that stuff. So next week's YouTube video will be a little different because it will be kind of like a trailer party. And it'll be a real trailer party because I just took stock of all the stuff I'm watching. And somehow it's 8 things. We'll get to what those are next week, though. You can also go check out my webcomic, which I stopped, it turns out, on like May 31st, hilariously enough. I will get back to it at some point, but it's called Bullshit News. The link to that is in the description of the podcast, wherever you're listening to this. If you're not listening to this, I'm not sure if I can post links on YouTube, but I think what I'll probably do is throw those links in the description of the YouTube channel's page. So you can go there, and while you're subscribing to the YouTube channel, so you can know when new episodes come out every single week, around 7 o'clock, hopefully. Last week was late because I screwed up the time. I got the right time on the wrong day. But you can go check out new episodes every week over on the channel page. But I'll actually put important links over there too, because that's the best way to handle it, I think. But with that said, without further ado, let's throw it to my lovely assistant so we can get a proper synopsis of My Hero Academia Vigilantes. Take it away,
Is a prequel spin-off set several years before the events of My Hero Academia, following an unlikely group of underground heroes who operate outside the law. At its center is Koichi, an earnest college student with a minor quirk called Slide and Glide, who teams up with the energetic street performer Pop Step and the rough, quirkless brawler Knuckle Duster. Together, they patrol the streets of Naruhata, tackling petty crime and uncovering a dangerous new drug called Trigger that enhances quirks and fuels villain activity. As they investigate the rising threat, the trio must confront powerful foes, inner doubts, and the consequences of acting without official hero status, all while discovering what it truly means to be a hero in the shadows.
Now, before we jump into my proper thoughts, I want to tell you how kind of connected to My Hero I am, because at first glance, you might not guess that I like that show, because it's a new gen, it's kind of one of the first new gen shonen and it is, I've talked about this in the past, but it is one of the first shonen to commit to the seasonal formula, and Vigilantes really does stick to that same seasonal formula that My Hero proper started, in that they have the season, and then they have I would imagine they're going to have bookend episodes, because the last episode of the first season of this really feels like a bookend episode. It feels like it's everything's wrapped up, the story for the season is done, we're just sitting with the characters for an extra episode to kind of ease out, which I always find really fun and fascinating, interesting. And I think it'll be interesting to see what they do to kind of dip back into the story in the next season. I know it's been confirmed, but I forget when. But to give you an idea of kind of how fascinated I am by My Hero specifically, I have two figures on my desk, two anime figures. I have a bunch of anime figures, but they sit behind me. I have two figures on my desk proper. The first on my left is Freyrin, because I love that show and I love that character. But the second on my right is actually Himiko Toga. And I've talked a lot on this show about her storyline and the way they portray her in that show, and the fact that they really go into why that rotten little weirdo ends up that way. And I think it's a really interesting, pardon the pun, stab at that kind of character, and how a world like My Hero Academia can lead to a character like Himiko Toga. Just a quick refresher for if you either didn't see that arc, which I know that some people may not have because it's not a very well loved arc of My Hero, but the My Villain Academia arc is very often derided, at least by Japanese fans. I'm not entirely sure about American fans, but Japanese fans very much did not like it. I liked it because it gave characters like Toga an explanation. It gave you a reason, like, why they're like this. Because, and I've talked about the Twice episode, the very first OVA episode, where they follow Twice, the League of Villains character Twice, through a kind of day in his life, and you see that not everybody's born with a quirk that's like PC or great or like gels well with society. Some people are just born with nightmare mutations. There's a version of this show that feels very much like X-Men, and it's obviously pulling from American superhero culture, My Hero Academia proper, not just Vigilantes. But in the tradition of X-Men, a lot of the X-Men in the like core cast of X-Men, a lot of the mutants in X-Men's world, but a lot of the X-Men themselves have mutant powers that are A, uncontrollable, and B, deeply and meaningfully harmful to the people around them. You look at a character like Rogue, who absorbs, if they're mutants, people's powers, but who absorbs, if they're humans, people's life force. And, you know, she kissed the guy, the teenager, and put him in a coma for like a year. Her first real boyfriend was another mutant, and she thought it would be fine. The reason Rogue flies in X-Men is because I think she slept. I'm not sure if she slept with him, but I know that she kissed him for long enough that he died. And she, as a result, has the ability to fly because he had the ability to fly. That's a curse. It's a and a lot of the way they get around the characters being evil or being perceived as evil is they treat those mutant powers like curses. In X-Men, Cyclops, Scott Summers, wears sunglasses because his eye lasers don't turn on and off. Basically, his visor is a big fancy trap door that opens and shuts to various degrees. And the eye lasers are always full force behind whatever he's wearing. So he wears special sunglasses, he wears the visor because that's what keeps them from just endlessly murdering anyone in their path when his eyes are open. And I think in some comics he even sleeps in them because it's just like if he were to open his eyes when he wakes up, he would just blow a hole through whatever wall he was facing or the ceiling and whatever was on the other side. And in My Hero Academia, what they do is something slightly different but along the same lines, and that is that some people are born with quirks that just happen, like the combination of quirks in their family or some, unluck of fate gives them these quirks that are, it's not even, I don't even want to say undesirable. They are functional curses, but in My Hero Academia, I don't think there are any, and I could be totally wrong, I don't think there are any passive quirks. I don't think there's stuff that just happens. Like, Rogue's mutant ability isn't something that's in her control, it's just something that her body automatically does. Same thing with Scott. Same thing with Wolverine. Wolverine just heals. He doesn't, it's not like he says heal and like the hole in his stomach closes up. It just happens. The healing factor is another passive one. There's a bunch of passive abilities in X-Men, but the Rogue, Cyclops, and Wolverine are kind of the three that you encounter the most. But in My Hero Academia, there's no, like I said, at least from what I remember, there's no passive quirks. Quirks will make your body weird in a way that, like, you don't get to pick. Look at, the crow guy, I think his name is Kurogami. And a bunch of other characters, like, even, like, Sarah looks disturbingly weird for just being a man with, like, tape elbows. Or Mineta, who's got, like, literal sticky grape hair. But the abilities are always active, and that means that the people using them choose to use them. In the very beginning of the series, you see that Izuku Midoriya's mother can, float small objects. His father, who's you never see, I don't think, can breathe fire. I think all of Bakugo's family has the nitroglycerin sweat. And actually, Bakugo's is the closest that you get to a passive quirk. And if you're paying close attention, a lot of Bakugo's costuming that he comes up with is to protect other people. Because, like, I sweat explosive liquid. It should be contained somehow. The other closest thing to actually the full passive quirk is actually, I forget the invisible girl's name, but she's permanently invisible. Which is like, if you, there's a great, and I know there's a side tangent, there's a great manga called Translucent that's about a girl who lives in a world and has this disease where and no one quite knows why, for whatever reason, people go slowly invisible over time. And first they turn slightly transparent, and then they just disappear altogether. And eventually, you don't, like, you never see, like, they never have a visible body ever again. And the really interesting thing about that manga is it's a manga about living with disability. It just is. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, I encourage you to go check it out. It's kind of hard to find. I think there's 4 volumes total. I think I have 3. But if you can find it, definitely read it. It's fascinating. It's also really heartwarming and touching and funny as hell. But the invisible girl in My Hero is probably the closest we have to a passive quirk, which means that everybody who has a quirk, the way people know what their quirk is A, they have a big scary registry, because there can be dangerous quirks. And I'm not saying there can be dangerous quirks that are inherently evil. There can be dangerous quirks that are useful, but they're dangerous just generally. Like, for example, you want to know when there's a 4-year-old running around whose sweat explodes, and so they made a big giant registry, and just like, this is what, like, everyone who's born who has a quirk, because as you know if you've seen the show, 20% of people just don't have quirks, which is insane and bad and like foreseeably very dangerous. But you want to register those stuff that's ultra dangerous. And the reason why I'm telling you all this is because Himiko's quirk could be creatively used really effectively, but it's not, because the very idea of it is so scary, and the like side effect of it is like a euphoric lust that she gets that just make people like see her kind of like a real world vampire and a nightmare. And the thing that society does to people who don't have desirable quirks in some way, who don't have quirks that are useful to society, is they kind of shun them, for lack of a better word. They actually completely reject them. So in Himiko's story, you find out that she was roundly rejected by everybody in her life. And that's what drove her down this path of like, this ability is part of me, but everybody thinks I'm a creepy weirdo because I have this ability, but I didn't get to make the choice to have it. If go ergo blah 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 blah. And that always really endeared me to the show, but there's always something missing to me for My Hero, and that's because it's got the classic giant cast shonen thing. Think Naruto, think Bleach, think any big, like, 20-person long cast of characters shonen thing. And it's pulling from, like, Naruto, Bleach, Dragon Ball, the classic shonens. It's very much in that vein. But the difference is the stuff I talked about with Himiko Toga doesn't happen until very late in My Hero Academia's run, like a bunch of seasons in, like, and so you spend so much time with these characters just doing kind of the typical shonen power, shonen jump, shonen power formula. And that's great, and it's really well done, but you've seen it before. You know the underdog story. You get like a Naruto style underdog story here. And what the thing about specifically side stories in these giant shonen universe is for the same reason that how the mail is delivered in Konoha in Naruto is fun. These side stories are fun because what the main story had to do, and what the main author had to do, was they had to build the world. And in doing that, they perceivably build a really fleshed out, like, concrete space to play in for themselves. If they do that well enough, another creator can come in and they can play around in that sandbox and make something really fun and interesting in that same vein. And that's really what My Hero Academia Vigilantes does, is they focus on people who don't have hero licenses, but they focus on people who don't have hero licenses at the very beginning of the kind of, like, birth of hero culture. So they, like, bring it back, I think maybe, like, 12 years or something. Far enough back where you don't really encounter many of the main characters, many of the children characters of My Hero Academia. You encounter a couple of the teachers, and you encounter All Might, but they bring it back far enough where you can still recognize the world, but where it's not as cut and dry. And the reason it's not cut and dry is because it's a lot shakier. That, like, the stuff, all the, like, defined things that you see in that are, like, defined rules about the world are just getting started in Vigilantes. And the first thing you notice is the main cast is really fun because they give them not, like, it's one thing for an author to give their main character a kind of power that is almost like a cheat code to the entirety of the story. Like, Naruto is basically a god by the end of the story. And yes, there are other Junichiri Junichirichi who he meets throughout the story, like Killer Bee, and, like, I think he meets the twin tail, the three tails or something at some point. And he obviously meets the twin tails, Gaara. But Naruto is the, like, end all be all before you get to the 10 tails, which is the nightmare demon. But so he has this distinct advantage over everybody else. In Vigilantes, it's like the original author was trying his best to come up with weird bad powers, because the main character, a college student named Koichi, has a power that they call, I think it's called Slide and Glide, and he can basically, by having 3 points of contact on the ground, he can slide across any surface, like stick to and slide across any surface, and go about as fast as a slow bike. Like you can jog and keep up with him. You would be jogging, but you can jog and keep up with him. He's not going particularly fast. And he's, like, crouching kind of like a frog on the ground, sliding around. And everybody rightfully is like, oh, that's weird. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. But he always wanted to be a hero. But he knew he would never get into a hero academy like UA or the other one. I forget the other one's name. But he knows that's not going to happen for him. And when he tried, he actually ends up saving the second character of the main cast, from a river on his way and missed his opportunity to take the entrance exam. But now he's in college, and he basically does vigilantism in the form of community service work, as at the beginning of the show, a character called the Nice Guy, and then later on he changed the name to the Crawler, which is like the worst for someone who people already assume is like looking up their skirts as he slides by. But the girl he saves is, I forget the girl's actual name, but her performer name, her stage name, is Popstep. And Popstep's quirk is she can like jump from any surface that she has a foot on, basically, and she can like jump, and it's not just like a like normal jump, it's like a leap every time, but it's almost as if she's bouncing on top of like a trampoline, like a silent trampoline, and propelling herself up. So Popstep is called that because she is less of a vigilante superhero and more of a vigilante like street performing idol, and I know this from being there. So when you're in Tokyo, I saw it around Sunday most often when I was staying in Akihabara. I would go through what I called the secret tunnel, which is this, because I stayed at a hotel that was kind of on one side of this tunnel, and on the other side of this tunnel was the like area of Akihabara that you always see in magazines and in photos and stuff. It was, the former Sega building, the whole thing. But one night when I was going through the tunnel to like go walk around, go find food, I came out and there were all of these street performers. And it was clear that they had paid for licenses, and they were collecting money, and it was all on the up and up. But Popstep doesn't have that. And she's not really collecting money, she's just doing it because she likes it. And she's got this little boombox, like, handheld karaoke microphone that she, like, sings from. And she's got this, like, weird, rabid fan base that shows up at, like, a street lamp on this street at this time to, like, hear her gorilla concert. It's pretty fun. But once again, this is not, like, we're not in United States of Smash territory. We're not even in Best Genius territory. She can jump real good, is the conceit of it. And then the last character is kind of one of the better characters in the My Hero Academia world. He is almost the... If All Might is the world's Superman, Knuckle Duster is this world's Batman. And the reason why I say that is because he's like, All Might is really clean cut, and he has like no definable facial features other than a giant grin. And Knuckle Duster is like a violent hobo. But the other thing about Knuckle Duster is he doesn't have any quirks. He's one of the 20% of people who's just quirkless. And you find that out when Aizawa encounters him in, like, I think, like, episode 3 or something. And Aizawa's like, what's the matter with this guy? I can't turn his quirk off. And then it occurs to Aizawa, like, oh no, I can't turn his quirk off because he doesn't have one. He's just that badass. And that's how the show breaks it to you. And on top of the main cast being really great, and also you get a bunch of side characters we'll get into a little later. The production quality is excellent. This is Studio Bones at its best. I think it's actually the Studio Bones team that handles theatrical releases. So this thing looks incredible. And it can also lean into that, like, American comic style that starts to get kind of fleshed out in My Hero Academia, but here it just runs with it every time. And on top of that, all the animation looks really great. Like the sliding glide thing is a great use of, like, we've created a way to move a still frame across the screen. But what, and this show isn't super heavy on action, but when it does action scenes, they rock. It's like incredible. There's a scene where Knuckle Duster is fighting the kind of main antagonist of the story, and whose name I forget. But this fight scene is like a Batman fight scene with kung fu elements that takes place across rooftops. It's incredible. It's hard to do that stuff really right and continuously get it right, and this show really does that really effectively. And then there's some, like, complicated stuff about this show that's, like, this show does a thing with Pop Step and with Koichi that makes complete sense. Because you find out that Koichi saved Pop Step in the past, and that she's been, like, kind of pining after him ever since. And he is fully in his 20s, and she is fully a teen. I think she's 15. Like, she's a teenager. And there's this real, like, one-sided crush thing happening. But because the internet is the internet, they treat it the same way as, like, he's into her too. But if you're watching the show, it's like teenage kids do this to older adults all the time. And it's on the older adults. And I'm sure Koichi is like, yeah, she has a thing for me. I'm never gonna act on it ever because, dude, I'm in my 20s. Like, the best way I can put it is, this is the responsible version of the Scott Pilgrim's Knife Chow situation. Like, when they open up Scott Pilgrim versus the World, both the movie and the comic book, it starts, the way they tell you that Scott Pilgrim is a piece of shit is that he's dating a 17-year-old when he's 22. And that 17-year-old is Knife Chow. And everybody's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? It's like, you're like babysitting. That's screwed up, man. And this show really definitely, like, displays the idea that, like, Pop has a real place in her heart for Koichi, and Koichi appreciates Pop, but he's not, like, that's not reciprocated ever. He is, like, adults in his life say, like, you dumbass, go apologize to her. She clearly dressed up for you. Do something nice for this poor girl. And he goes and he does, and, like, it's a sweet moment. But he's not doing it because, like, he's like, I want to take you to bed. He's doing it because, he likes her, like, she's a good friend, and, like, he wants her to know that she's appreciated. You do get a character later who's, like, a meaningful love interest for Koichi, and who's, like, age appropriate and from his college class and all this other stuff. But in the show itself, it never creates an actual two-way street of a relationship between Pop Step and Koichi. It's always a one-sided crush, and my my guess is that that's always going to be true. Like, it's always going to be, Pop really adores Koichi, but Koichi never returns it because, like, it feels like a little sister, big brother scenario where the little sister really idolizes the big brother, even though the brother's kind of a loser. At least in the beginning of the first season, he's just kind of a like weirdo with a good heart. But the big brother is like, yeah, that's nice. I like you as a friend. It has that familial quality that, even non-familial relationships can have and should have in the kind of like age gap they've got going on there. Particularly the underage, where one is underage, one is over 18. And it's just, it was nice to see a show handle that really deftly and not be, and like, if there's any weirdness there, it's coming from her. And he's not acknowledging it. And it just, it struck me as interesting that made people as uncomfortable, as like lots of the more uncomfortable things about, say, jobless reincarnation make people. But that's a common thing that happens with people, especially in America, many times in America, kind of realizing that young girls have those feelings about anyone. Like, in people's minds, they only allow themselves to think about people of age experiencing those kinds of emotions and thinking about it in a really complex way because everybody doesn't want to get labeled this, that, or the other thing. And so this show handling it and just nailing the landing every time on like, this is what this kind of thing looks like in reality. We're good. Now there's like other, because there's a weird, in My Hero Academia proper, and actually in lots of new gen shonen, there's a weird fan service thing that happens. So in and actually Danny Mata called Jujutsu Kaisen on this in the first season. Like, Jujutsu Kaisen's first season is a little hornier than it needs to be. Actually, probably a lot hornier than it needs to be. My Hero Academia is infamously way hornier than it needs to be. Miss Midnight exists. Like, Momo's costume exists. There's 900 ways they could have made like a window for stuff to come out of her skin directly. They didn't need to make the deepest V known to man. Mineta is like a bane of the fandom's existence because he's a little lust goblin. And that does extend to this, but it's, the humor element of it is dialed up so much higher that it doesn't read as weird. So there's a character called Captain Celebrity, and the kind of joke with Captain Celebrity is that he's a total sleazebag. He's a total fame whore sleazebag, and he's hero from America. But you realize, but the story basically tells you like, oh, he left America because he's avoiding his wife. Because there are several lawsuits waiting for him in America against women he slept with and cheated on his wife with. And the show pretty much nails him on it. They're like, oh, you're... Like, this guy's not a good guy. and then they never let you forget how weird that is. And like the like stuff with like the little boys being obsessed with Pop's ass, it is definitely there, but it's just like passed off as like little kids being little kids and like a 15-year-old making some very 15-year-old clothing choices about her costuming. Like being like, I want to be someone people pay attention to. I know. I'll just wear this weird, sexy succubus costume. But for the most part, it's not. It doesn't feel. It is certainly horny, but it doesn't feel, to me at least, nearly as horny as My Hero does. Even before you get to all the like weirdness of the My Hero fandom stuff, or even just once again, Himiko Toga exists in that show. And after that, you have this kind of like treatment of this show, because the show is technically it's technically a prequel to My Hero, but was made after it. It has some advantages to being in that position. In this show, you are seeing the kind of burst of like hero fandoms in the world of My Hero. You know, Koichi runs around his hero costume, which is an All Might hoodie, and these hoodies are like famously in the show very hard, like not very easy to get, and oftentimes limited edition. And he has the entire collection, all except for one, and that was the one that he wrapped Pop in after he rescued her from the river, and he never got it back. Eventually, she gives it back to him, but the show's very tongue in cheek with, it's like, oh, he's a huge fucking nerd. Like, there's no other way to put it. In the same way that Deku is a giant All Might nerd, but also a giant hero nerd, Koichi is just, he's not as bad as Deku is, but he like has this casual like. He's definitely the kind of person who walks by a Target like, I'm just gonna check for the latest All Might hoodie. If it's there, I don't need to get it. I probably will, but I don't need it. And he comes out with it. But the other thing that's great about this is you have a more crime-ridden setting. So part of the thing about My Hero Academia is the only crime you're seeing in My Hero Academia is essentially crime against superheroes, with the exception of the first, with a couple exceptions. It's all stuff aimed at the kids at UA. It's not stuff aimed at the general public. The crime in Vigilantes is actually stuff aimed at the general public, and the result is actually a thing that is much more, that feels much more real and makes a lot more sense, and there seems to be this greater need for Vigilantes because just like crime happening everywhere, like people just snatch, like there's a moment where somebody just snatches somebody's purse. There's, in the actual story, there's this kind of unstable quirk-enhancing drug that causes, like, Godzilla to just be in the middle of the shopping district all of a sudden. Nobody knows why. But that kind of more crime-ridden, less sanitized version of the show's universe is really interesting. I think it interacts really interestingly with the kind of way that the universe that you look at, not all of Japan, but specifically Tokyo. So the Tokyo I went to is already a different version of it that you'd go to if you went now. The Tokyo that, say, Jake Adelstein, the now famous author of Tokyo Vice, moved to in the 90s is like does not exist. You can go find him on I find him usually on Threads, but you can find him on basically anything. You could ask him questions about stuff, and he'll freely tell you whatever you want to know. He's not very private about it usually, but he will also probably say, like, and that doesn't exist anymore. But I actually had a great conversation with him about pachinko parlors, and he's like, yeah, they stop people from smoking in them, but those things are still nightmares. I'm like, yeah, they still super are. And in My Hero Academia's version of Japan, the period of time between the Vigilantes series and the mainline series has changed the world to such a degree that it's scrubbed a lot of, like, the just straight grossness out. Like, you can't see the idea of... Actually, pachinko parlors is the perfect example of even, like, pachinko parlors existing in My Hero Academia. But they exist in Vigilantes. You know, like, the kind of, like, scummy, you know, red light district stuff still exists in Vigilantes. And kind of one of the highlights of the setting is actually that, like, the district, the ward they're all in, is not the best place to be all the time. And you learn this when they eventually run into the character who will eventually become Stain. And they like, in a kind of mini arc in the story, they take you through the birth of Stain, the birth of that character, and how he goes from this character who is helping the, like, Queen Bee character to being this, like, full-fledged nightmare that's just running around. And you're led to believe that Stain was always out there. He was just always out there doing this somewhere. And when you encounter him in the Stain arc in My Hero Academia proper, he just came to that specific ward to do his weirdness. I don't think they were super clear about his attachment to All Might in this version of him, but by the time you meet him in My Hero Academia proper, he's clearly, like, attached himself to that concept as a thing. But I mentioned before that Pop is actually younger than everybody else. I think that's kind of great, because you have this problem in these shows, in shonen action shows, in that there's always one age group or two age groups. So for the perfect example, everybody in One Piece is pretty close to each other's age, if not actually functionally. Like Chopper is functionally the same age as Luffy, as is Sanji, as Zoro. The ones who stand out are Robin and Frankie, and that's because they're supposed to be meaningfully older. Like, they're supposed to be in their 30s than anybody else on the ship. But, like, everybody feels kind of like a nebulous late teens to mid-20s situation. And when you make a character who's meaningfully younger than the rest of the cast, think Konohamaru in the original Naruto, not Naruto Shippuden. That's a little bit different. They have to play that character off as like a side gag character, because like they're not gonna put Konohamaru in the Land of Waves arc. They're just not gonna do it. Zabuza would kill that little snot-nosed brat. But making Pop like a good 5 to 7 years younger than Koichi, and like a good chunk, like a good easy couple of decades younger than Knuckle Duster, gives you this spread of, opinions and stuff that makes the entire main cast feel much more like a found family unit. And then you get to in a rare thing for these shows, you get to a meaningful moment for a family member when you meet Koichi's mom. And like, Koichi's mom is like, and he says she's incredibly strict and it's a problem. And Koichi tries to get I forget the reporter girl, his college, his college friend's name, but he tries to get her to pass herself off as his girlfriend, and her mom pegs the lie immediately. And this is when you see Koichi's mom's quirk, which is basically she can bitch smack people from like across the room. Like, it's not like her arm stretches. She like psychically swats her hand and you get smacked upside the head. And that's done as this joke throughout the episode. And this is where I think the Vigilantes shows its storytelling chops, is in this like at first gag and then by the end very serious episode. By the end of the episode, you realize that like Koichi's quirk isn't just about sliding across the floor. Koichi can actually fly, but he's been psychologically conditioned to not, because when he was born, he obviously had full use of his quirk, but his mother was so not controlling but overprotective that instead of like paying it, like sitting with her kid and being like, no, you can't fly over there right now, or like, taking some precautions but still letting her kid kind of freely explore his ability, she started smacking him out of the sky. And that stunted his use of his quirk until a climactic moment in that episode. And to take like a kind of gag there and make it into this big deal, limitations set on the what's it called, on the main character is really interesting, because in in My Hero Academia proper, it starts out with Deku having no quirk and then getting gifted a quirk by All Might. You have all these characters who are villains in the show who are given quirks by One for All in order to do his bidding. And you have Shigaraki and all this other stuff. But so they explore the abuse of quirks and like the kinds of abuse you can get into in like a superpowered society. But all of that stuff is pretty high level. Like turning somebody into a Nomu is like a war crime. You know what All For One does to the assassin lady, the one with the hair bullets, from whose name I forget, but I love her character design and her character, but I forget her name, is like human experimentation crossed with like mind control and like, you know, indentured servitude, essentially. Those are really high level, like terrifying human rights violations. You don't get anything in the original My Hero Academia that feels like garden variety abuse. That's just like the common everyday stuff that your parents do to you that mess you up somehow. The kind of like projecting that happens when you're a parent onto your kid somehow. Whether that be with expectations, whether that be with, you know, disappointment, or the kind of like light emotional manipulation, or any of that stuff. You don't see any of that in the original My Hero. The closest you really get is Aoyama and his family, but like that's a different thing. So when you see this kind of like soft abuse of a child and soft like emotional harm of a kid that's been done to somebody who doesn't even remember it. Like he was so young that it didn't register to him that he shouldn't do it. He just lost the ability to fly. And so by the like last third of the show, he's really trying to regain that ability because he did it briefly for a moment, and now he wants to like actually be able to do it. But he lost the muscle memory of like they show him as a baby floating out of his crib, and they show his mother just being like, "Oh, smack!" And that it's clear that was the beginning of that like negative reinforcement in the way that you negatively enforce any kind of pet from doing dumb shit. She negatively reinforced him against using his quirk in this way. And just the whole show is really, it's a really fascinating extension of this, of My Hero's world. Is a really interesting exploration of kind of the low level crime that they largely don't deal, that they, not that they aren't dealing with in My Hero Academia's world, but they don't show you being dealt with largely in My Hero Academia's world. The most you kind of get is gentle criminal that I can think of. You don't get a lot of like, well, this person, you know, cash grabbed a convenience store. This person, you know, grabbed an old lady's purse and ran. You get the big high level stuff. And the thing that you quickly realize in, and this is kind of where I want to end it, the thing you quickly realize in My Hero, in Vigilantes, is that the even the like pop-up quirks that are the pop-up villains that are happening all over the place. At the very beginning, the main heroes aren't showing up for that. Maybe you get Aizawa for the one that was like a giant Godzilla monster. Actually, you get Aizawa for a couple giant Godzilla monsters. But and the really interesting thing with the pop-up quirk is because those people are being manipulated by the first season's main antagonist, they treat those characters like they fucked up, but they're not bad people. They might be misunderstood people, but they're not bad people. And the show's very clear to be like, these people don't know what happened to them. It just occurred. It doesn't make them like any more or less of a person, which I find really interesting because so many of the villains that you see in My Hero Academia are treated as enemies to peace and justice, like bad people, no question. Even when you're given, as I mentioned numerous times before, Himiko Toga's backstory. They give you that backstory so they can do more with the character later. They don't treat her. The camera doesn't treat her really any differently in conflict with, like, say, Uraraka or Froppy. But the kind of line is very clear of like, oh, these people didn't ask for this. They didn't want to be this way. Something manipulated them into it. And something is manipulating them into it. But the last thing they do with this show is they kind of write Knuckle Duster out of the show because of the plot. The plot with his daughter ends, essentially. And it's interesting because you're not sure if they dealt with... You know they didn't deal with the actual antagonist of the show because you kind of see him. You kind of see them. I don't know if it's a him or her, but you kind of see them. And Knuckle Duster just kind of leaves. Which is a shame if he never comes back, because he's a great character. But he just kind of leaves. He just kind of walks off into the sunset, because he's dealt with what he needs to deal with around his family. And that's actually where I'm going to leave it this time. But if you like the show, be sure to check it out every Thursday, wherever you listen, or on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to hit the notification bell and subscribe, and like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when new episodes come out, because they do come out every week. And on that note, I have been Alex. This has been Bento Radio, and I will talk to you next time.